And welcome into Inside LAFC podcast, another great show. It's all good times ahead here for LAFC. I am Max Bretos, joined by Stephen Beitashour, Beta, and we have a lot to get to. All good times. We have LAFC coming back home. They'll be at home for the next 2 weekends. But before we get into that, have you been watching the Euros? Have you been getting up early, tuning in?
Not super early. I got a couple of young boys, so try to get as much sleep as they'll give me. But yeah, a little bit of golf, a little bit of Euros. It's a good time right now. Copa's starting pretty soon, so lots to choose.
Golf.
A little bit of golf. Did you catch some of the U.S. Open this past weekend?
I did not catch it. I put it this way: my friends, I'm on a thread. They all talk about golf, and I give them grief. And they were all excited, and they said something about Rory McIlroy, and I assumed he won, and I found out later that he choked a day later. So
it was a bit of a choke job. He hasn't won a PGA Championship in like 10 years or something. This was it, and he missed a 3-foot happen. So it was sad. It was sad for the Rory fans out there.
That was Are you a Rory fan? Who's your guy?
I am a Rory fan. I think what he's done for the league, it's been good. He's humble. He works hard. He obviously has been at the top. He's struggling a little bit right now, but I was rooting for him.
Who's the guy who won all those PGA championships? I forgot his name now. He's my guy. He's been to Florida State. I'm crying out loud. Let's stop talking about golf.
Yeah. Let's go back to LAFC. Let's go back to Euros.
Go back to LAFC. Before we get in to talk about the situation LAFC are in, which again, it's fantastic as they were hitting the road. They're getting road trips. Their defense has been stout. We're going to be joined by Junior Gonzalez later on with the head coach of MLS NEXT Pro, LAFC2. Talk about that team. We'll talk about grooming players for the first team, and we'll get Beta's thoughts about NEXT Pro 2 as he has lived it as well in those final couple years as he saw what they did with the Rapids and now seeing it with LAFC. But let us jump into what's going on with LAFC. We're going to do some big picture items, Beta, about this team because we go back to that San Jose game they lost at Levi's, and then they went on this run. Defensively, we're not getting broken down, and they went from team that had a lot of questions to me, legit MLS Cup contender. And I've been hearing that from the national media that covers MLS. Who are the teams to beat? It's been Inter Miami, FC Cincinnati's there. Maybe the Galaxy would be considered in Real Salt Lake at Chicharrongo. But do LAFC have those MLS Cup credentials? How do you see them amongst the other teams at this stage? We've now, after the Austin game, LAFC have played 18 of 34 MLS games. So we're over the halfway stage of the MLS season. How are those credentials looking?
It's funny if you look at our previous conversations earlier in the year, right when we started doing these podcasts, and we were talking about the road woes, right, of LAFC. And now you just look at the form that LAFC is on the road. They can't lose, right? They're minimizing mistakes. They're defensively sound. They're a unit, from the front line to midfield to the back line, just together and difficult to break down. And, going to Orlando is a tough place to play, especially this time of year. Weather is definitely a factor. And they looked like the dominant team, a team that, in my opinion, it should be a favorite and a serious contender for MLS Cup this year.
People are already saying this. I know it's way too early. People are going, and I was talking to Brian Dunson, our broadcast team, goes, wouldn't it be crazy if it came down to Inter Miami and LAFC? That would be the dream final, right? Messi and his boys, LAFC, the black and gold standard of the last 2 years. I'm not saying we're going to get that, but I think if I was in a sports book and there was a list, that would be the number one option in my estimation. Real Salt Lake is right there with LAFC, but I think they'd be the favorites out of the West, and I think Miami would be the favorites out of the East.
If MLS can choose, if the league can choose, they would say probably LA, New York. They've been trying so hard for this. Not that they can do anything to make it happen, but they've been praying for that. But the next best thing would definitely be Miami and Messi against LAFC, the black and gold standard. Every single person would tune into that match.
This would be the best thing, Beta. Come on, it would be the best. They would be doing backflips in the MLS offices, especially if Messi was there and playing and all healthy. Hopefully it would be in LA, but even if it was in Miami, just because the stadium's nicer, let's be perfectly honest. But that would be the biggest MLS Cup final ever.
Every fan of other teams would be livid. They would just,
hey, the heck with them. I'm just kidding.
Oh, but they will also be watching. Every single one of them would be watching. Let's be honest. Like every single person, whether in the US or not, whether you're in other countries, everyone's going to tune into that game. That will definitely break the viewership records. Safe to say that.
Let me knock on wood just real quickly about that, because previously the biggest final was probably that LAFC Philadelphia, because those were the top two teams that year. They navigated the postseason and they made it. I also remember in 2000, sometimes you get the great finals, sometimes you don't. Remember 2010? I covered that for, it was in Toronto. I covered that
the
game.
One Dallas and Colorado, right?
Colorado and FC Dallas. And that's the game that made them change having a neutral site final. They said, that's it.
Yeah. I do remember that one. People are like, why do you remember that one? I remember most of them, but that was my first year in the league. I was with the San Jose Earthquakes, and we got to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Colorado Rapids. So even back then, you would play, in the opposite conference. They just kind of did the best. I think it was like 4 teams, and then after that, it's a free-for-all just for the best teams. There was also only like 13 or 14 teams in the league at the time. So a little different now with 30 next year with SDFC coming in.
You kids, you got to remember how the league was. We were like, San Jose was playing for the Eastern Conference Trophy. I remember the Red Bulls won the Western Conference Trophy against Salt Lake one year. It was all out of whack, but it's all good now. We won't jinx it, but that would be, I think, the number one option, according to the sports books, I would say, I think to the logic. And then maybe, I'd say the Galaxy would certainly be there from the West, maybe both ahead of Real Salt Lake. All due respect to RSL, have been fantastic. And it would be Inter Miami, who have been so consistent, even winning games without Messi this past week, ahead of FC Cincinnati. And I think that's it. I think there's a nice group at the top. And LAFC, we're not part of that group, but they're part of that group now. So we shall see.
I think that's a fair list. I'd agree with that. And LAFC is definitely part of that group now.
There's a group for MVP. And until I'd say a couple weeks ago, it was Messi, maybe Luis Suarez, and certainly Chicho Arango. Chicho Arango has become the front runner. But here comes Denny Bouanga, and it seems like he's doing it every game. It's whether he scores a goal, whether he wins a penalty, whether he assists his teammates. He has been so consistent. People were questioning this player at the beginning of the year. It just wasn't clicking. He just signed the big contract. People were wondering, they say you sign the big contract and maybe the effort's not there. The effort is there. I don't know if he's number one, but when we look at the contribution he's made with LAFC, how realistic do you have a campaign for him to be the potential MVP?
I think those group of players that you just mentioned are worthy candidates, but I also think Bouanga falls into that. We talked earlier this year about just opportunities missed by Bouanga, whether it was the post, whether it was great saves, or just a couple blunders where tap-ins. Last year, he was just every tap-in, it was like nothing. But right now, he's starting to catch form, whether it's assists, whether it's the goals, and it's at the right time, right? You're about the halfway point. You want to carry that momentum going into the second half of the season. So I definitely put him in that group of candidates, but I wouldn't say he's quite at the top yet. For me, I still have Chicho just a little bit at the top. Again, you're looking at a Salt Lake team that no one had, where they're at right now. Yes, everyone's going to say Messi and what he's doing, but when you have that expectation versus you don't have any expectation at all and you're just surpassing everything, I feel like Chicho's got that upper hand just for now. But Bouanga continues this trend that he's on, he's going to be at the top for sure.
A couple of things I heard Pablo Mastroeni mention, because they were saying, what's different about Chicho Arango with LAFC and Real Salt Lake? And he made a really good point. He goes, with Real Salt Lake, where he's the coach, he's the captain. When he was here, Carlos Vela was the captain. I think that you've seen him kind of take that role a little better. And he wasn't going to be the captain ahead of Carlos Vela. So it's been a good situation for him. LAFC have done really well without him. With Denny Bouanga, they have a legit MVP candidate as well. And we heard this from Steve Trundle after the game. Denny came back from international duty ahead of the Orlando game. So he came from African World Cup qualifiers. Timothy Tillman came from the U.S. camp, but that's not as big as the trip. And we get used to this. He makes these huge trips, and he looks like he's been with the team the whole time, and it wasn't the case. I don't know how he does it, but this guy is a freak athletically and physically and cardiovascularly, if that's a word. It's amazing. It's not a word, I know.
It is amazing. We all know what you're talking about. The times that I did get called into the Iran national team, I mean, it's a long flight. You're jet lagged. You're just sitting there for hours, whether you have a layover or not with these long trips. It's exhausting physically and mentally. So to see what he's doing, it's really impressive. You know, I lived it firsthand, and for the fans watching, it's not easy. It's not as like, oh yeah, you know, you get paid to do this, just do it. No, there's a lot more that goes into it, between recovery, between injury prevention, all that stuff. So the sports science has definitely evolved, which benefits him, but still he is a freak of nature when you talk about athleticism and all the other things that lets him do this.
Remarkable. It's amazing. It feels like he's only going to get better. It seems like he's headed on that path, and we're just glad he's in these LAFC colors. How are we feeling about Mateusz Bogusz, a little Mati Magic, who he won't be an MVP candidate, but he's playing like a best 11 kind of guy at times, maybe just a tick below that. Maybe as a most improved player in the league. I think he's certainly in the mix there. He's it's similar than with Bouanga to a different degree. I mean, it's a different kind of player, but it seems like he makes a contribution with set pieces. He scored a goal against Orlando. He's just always it's always positive. It's that the inconsistencies seem to be gone with him as well.
Yeah, it's almost like he knows a big summer signing is on the way. He is definitely performing. He is playing so well. For me, he's one of my favorite players right now to watch with LAFC. Just all the little work that he does, the work that goes unnoticed a lot of times by most fans when you're constantly just watching the ball. When I watch a game, I'm constantly watching everything around the ball. I want to see where guys are positionally, offensively, defensively, what they're doing. And he's done everything right. He works so hard for the team. And then he's getting the goals, the assists. And I think every coach, every fan just loves that part. So it's going to be interesting once Olivier comes in. It's, you know, what are they going to do? I've seen this in teams in the past where, you know, your team is doing so well, you're in such good form, and you get this new big signing. Do you want to put him in right away, or do you want to just, hey, let him get settled to the team, to the standards, the black and gold standards that we talked about before, get familiar with his teammates? So it's going to be some interesting decisions with Steve Trundle and their staff.
With no Kike Oliveira, Kai Kamara came in, and Bogusz played a little out wide. So he's played 3 or 4 different positions, and they need depth. But that's going to be a tough conversation if you say to Matty, as well as he's played, hey, you're going to be a 30, 45-minute guy. I don't know it's a good conversation. Have you ever been in those situations where you've had 2 really good options, if it included you or a teammate, and you're like, I don't know what this
it's
not you can do. There's not enough room for both.
We're all competitors. There's a reason that we've made it where we have, and it's never a fun conversation. You know, thankfully, when that time came for me, I was at the end of my career, so it was a little easier to accept. Still, tough pill to swallow, but you know, Bogusz is young. He's in his prime. I can't imagine he's going to be too thrilled when and if this conversation comes up. But at the end of the day, we always talk about team first. And if he wants to win a championship and he wants to help his team win, which he probably does, then he's going to be okay. You know what? If I need to come on the 60th minute or 70th minute or 80th minute, maybe some games I start, some games I don't. He'll do everything he can to help his team win a championship. And then offseason comes around. Okay, now let's talk about maybe a potential move or do something that will make you happy again. But he's a professional, and he'll deal with it the right way.
And that's the reality of Major League Soccer, and with the salary cap, you know, if you're gonna have a tough time to get all these guys under one roof. We've seen it so many times. That's kind of what happened with Chicho Arango, and it's you're gonna have to have. There may not be room for all these guys, but in the meantime, I'm not saying that he moves to the bench. I think he still has a chance to be a starter. His versatility will come up in a big way. I don't think Olivier Giroud comes to the team until mid-August, so there's still time, and we'll see where all the other pieces fall. But it's I was watching the Polish team play in the Euros, and the way Mateusz Bogusz, I know it's hard, it's not apples to apples, but it felt like he's like 1 degree away from maybe making it to the international stage. He's just been so impressive. It's all good news, Beta, with this team right now.
Exactly. Those are good problems to have. It's awkward, uncomfortable conversations, but they are good problems to have for sure.
There was there's obviously some intrepidation that this time of the season you're going to be without a lot of guys. Even go to the beginning. If Mexico had made the Olympics, Omar Campos is probably leaving this summer. Timothy Tillman, last player to miss out on the 26-man roster for the Copa America. I think it's going to be a deep run for the United States in the Copa, so just keep that in mind. Kiko Oliveira went. Maxime Chanot, Denny Bouanga, they're going to be busy with their national teams as they were last week. So we were curious as to how they're going to keep the band together. And right now, as we head into these summer months, the band, with the exception of Kiko Oliveira and Olivier Giroud, we have to include him as a member of this team, is coming all together, and they seem happy. And they're, this 2-game road trip at Orlando and Austin where they could really do some team bonding. This team feels like they are focused on this. They're not worried about what's happening on the international stage. They are keeping it all self-contained. It feels like they're playing some pretty decent music together.
It does feel like that. And you feel bad for those individuals that you just mentioned. Anytime you have an opportunity to play for your national team and represent your country, it's such an honor. So you do feel bad for those guys that did have to come home. But it's great for LAFC. They got everybody. They got the band back together, got the group together, and now you just continue this momentum that you were on. We kind of spoke about it a couple weeks ago about, sometimes when guys go away, it's tough to come back because other players stepped in and you lose that rhythm, or maybe you're just a little bit more familiar with your national team now. But everyone's back. It's going to be smooth sailing. Obviously, just got to prevent injuries, and that's part of the sports science team that I talked about earlier. But other than that, yeah, LAFC should be chomping at the bits right now going into the summer window.
And they're going to be busy. Quarterfinals of the U.S. Open Cup, the Leagues Cup is coming up, and they want to hit all those spots so that they could make the CONCACAF Champions Cup next year. I'd be shocked if they're not in that tournament in some area qualification process. I think they'll certainly make it. So, by the way, speaking of the bands, what instrument would you play if we had a band?
What instrument? Oh man,
are you musically inclined?
What was it? Probably in middle school, which was ages ago. I think I took You Have to Take Something, and I think I took piano, but I don't remember anything from that. That was ages ago. So yeah, if that counts.
I thought you were going to say like I played the baritone or like the sax or something, and like.
I wish it were something cooler. Sorry to let you down.
What are you talking about? Piano's the coolest instrument of the bunch.
Boring.
Piano. Mozart. Yeah. Steely Dan. I don't know.
Yeah. Not near what I can do.
Beta tickling the ivories back in the day, but not. You could be in our band anytime, man. We don't have to plug in the keyboard. We'll unplug it. You could pretend to play it. Just be up there and act like you're having a great time. You're in.
Put it on demo mode. You know the demo mode? I'll put that on and it'll just play something. I'll push some buttons. Yeah.
So the guys are together. It feels like they're happy. And I'd honestly say I don't think that was always the case early in the season. There was a grind and we were worried about where this team was going. But they all seem happy. They like to be around each other when we get to see them at training. One of the big keys was building depth. And I think many people were waiting for this rush of players to be signed. And very quietly, they have done that. We'll talk about MLS NEXT Pro 2 here, but, they've had a couple guys kicked in there that have made that first team. And we'll talk more about that with Junior Gonzalez later in the program as well. But just internally, they had the Maxime Chanot signing. Kai Kamara has been very handy. We're all sitting here waiting for goal 145, and what we're missing is he's doing all these other things. I'll mention the Orlando game. They used all 5 subs. A guy like Nathan Ordaz, who we felt like wasn't maybe not in that core group, comes in, plays important role involved in that third goal that was scored by Denny Bouanga. How do we see it? I don't know if we can call this a deep team, but I certainly get the impression that Steve Cherundolo is more confident in more players than just that 12, 13 players that we saw in the first 2 months of the year. Maybe there'll be a little rotation here and there because he's a little more confident. We shall see. We haven't got there yet, but I get the feeling that maybe we're closer to it.
I do like the depth when you look at positions. So your defensive group, your midfielders, your forwards. I think there's a lot of rotational balance in there where multiple players can play in different positions, whether it's the center backs to outside backs, whether it's your midfield trio. I think if one of those guys goes out, someone steps in and doesn't skip a beat. And same with your front three, especially with Olivier Giroud coming in, where they've got some players. We talk about Bogusz, his versatility, being able to play out wide if Oliveira is missing. So I like that factor. And then you see some of the guys on the bench where you put them on other teams, they're probably starters. So I don't think it's necessarily a deep team all the way to 18, but it's much deeper than early in the year where we were talking 12 or 13. Now I think you're talking 15, 16 players. So not a full bench where you're confident in every single one, but a majority of those guys, I honestly think that they can step in on other teams and be starters for.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 guys that played every game. There'd be a couple more. I know Atuesta would be one of those if he wasn't suspended. Timothy Tillman missed a game with the international duty, and Kike Oliveira is now off there. But I think there's positions for those guys. Do we believe there'll be more movement in the summer? I think so. Maybe one more player. I don't know at what area. But as you said, the rotation's good. You got the 3 fullbacks. You got the 3 center backs, which you're confident in all 3 or all 6 of those guys.
Yeah.
The starting midfield, now you can get Duenas or Bogusz to drop back. They have put cover. And on the reverse, if let's say Kike Oliveira is there, Kai Kamara can slip in, Olivier Giroud. I just don't see a situation where they're like, we're going to have to put someone off the grid, out of left field, so to speak, to fill a gap. I think they feel good. And this is something they've worked on all season, that they feel good about finding a spot in case something happens, injury, knock on wood, or international duty.
Yeah, I think John's done a great job of putting this group together. And, I'm sure he's always looking to add pieces, but it's a moment where what piece, what do you really need to add? Obviously, if some blockbuster deal comes through where you can't say no, and it'll help the team, he'll pull the trigger. But right now, I think LAFC, John Thornton, Steve Cherundolo, they can look at this staff, the team, and they can be proud of what they have. And we talked about earlier, it's a championship contender right now. So it's about now staying healthy, minimize injuries, keeping everybody on the field, and once playoff comes around, and that's the time to just fly and be at your best.
And I don't think anyone's unhappy. I think everyone's happy. Even if some of the guys are playing 20, 25 minutes, they're all happy to be part of this squad. We're going to bring back Black and Gold Weekly here in a moment. Beta, I hope you're ready for that. This is your baby. But before we go, I want to talk about MLS NEXT Pro, because LAFC2 have seen a lot of guys come up, bounce back from the first team. And 2 guys, Tommy Musto and Luis Mueller, have signed first-team contracts, which is huge. A lot of guys aren't signing first-team contracts, even guys that are playing very well. But that shows you that the machine's working. Your last couple years there with the Colorado Rapids, you saw MLS NEXT Pro starting to click. How have you seen this as a league, and how important is this service to have that second team that is connected in every way, from the colors to the jerseys, across the board, from the first team to the second?
I think it's something it's great for the young players that are coming into the league that maybe aren't quite ready to step into the first team. And for me, I love watching how LAFC posted on social media, new player incoming, and it's from their second team. It's not necessarily an international player or a domestic player. It's from their own twos, from LAFC2. So I love anytime you see that, because it gives hope. These kids are signing at a young age, and their hope, their dream is to play for the first team. So the past couple of years with the Colorado Rapids, I saw it firsthand. I was helping a lot of these young players develop on the field, off the field, with game film, with whatever, you just tactical stuff, with touches, exercises. And to see some of them, one was Ollie Larraz, to see him excel this year. For a majority of the year, he was with the Twos last year, and he was their player of the year. And now this year, he gets called in for preseason with the first team, and he continues to excel, and confidence builds. And now look at him. You can't take him off the pitch. He's been starting every game, having an incredible first year as a real starter. And he's still a young kid where the Twos really benefited him just to get that confidence and just, you know what, I could play at this level. I was just the player of the year for the Twos. Let me go step up with the first team, and he's doing it again. So I think it's definitely beneficial, and hopefully it just continues to grow because you see the benefits of it.
Philadelphia Union have Kevin Sullivan, who's this super teenage 14-year-old that is signed with Manchester City. So you'll get to see him with Philadelphia Union too. I don't think he's going to be pushed up to the first team anytime soon. But it's not just kids. We saw it with Maxime Crépeau last year with LAFC. I did the Minnesota game this weekend. Clint Irwin, he's 35. He was playing on the Minnesota second team. And now with their starting goalkeeper off with Canada at the Gold Cup, he's going to start for the first team. And so, I mean, I know you're 35, you want to play there, but he was a good trooper, went down there, and now he gets to play some first team games. So it's good for the old timers too.
There were a couple games where with the Colorado Rapids, we had a bye, and at the time, Robin Fraser wanted to keep us fit. Said, "Look, first team guys, you're playing in the Rapids 2 game," and we did. And everyone, you don't use it as a training session because game fitness is different than being just fit. Everyone talks about game fitness. So you have to play in these games to continue this just level of excellence of fitness, because that's what it takes to be dominant in MLS. So you see that. You see sometimes those older players playing those twos, but I'm going to go back in my day, we used to have the supplemental league. And, that's just the reserve league. That's just another way to get guys who maybe don't start every week to keep them fresh, keep them fit, so that when the time comes, if someone gets injured or something happens and you need to throw someone in, at least they're ready and they're not dying in the 30th minute because they haven't played a game in 4 weeks. So,
great point.
Yeah.
Beta, you ready for Black and Gold Rewind?
I'm always ready. I love Black and Gold Rewind. Let's go. Harvey
gets the hard ones. This was bittersweet. Going back to 2018, and with LAFC and their game at the Rose Bowl coming up on 4th of July, we're ramping up towards that. Go to LAFC.com, get your tickets. You want to be part of this 4th of July, I'll be there. I'll see if I can get Beta out there. We'll all be there. We'll see the fireworks and have a great afternoon, evening together. So go to LAFC.com for tickets there. Back in 2018, we all know the first ever meeting at Dignity Health Sports Park. It was the Zlatan Carlos Vela game. Second game, first time at BMO Stadium, July 26th, 2018, LAFC Galaxy. This would end up a 2-2 scoreline. You were in the starting 11. I imagine everything was amped up. I remember from the sidelines it was amped up because of what happened in the first meeting, and LAFC wanted to protect their home court. Take us back to the pregame and how you guys approached that big meeting in a rivalry that was just beginning, but you had to know that this was something special.
It was something special. We felt it as players. The fans felt it. The entire league felt it. It's pregame, building up to that game, not even pregame. That week, you just felt the excitement, the angst, and we had a point to prove. We went to their place. 32-52 showed up, and we went up 3-0 and just dominated, and the Olays were going around, and we just blundered that one and ended up losing 4-3. And so now we're like, okay, redemption time. So building up, game starts, and we're off to a flying start. I think we score in the first 5 minutes, and then we score another one, and probably in the first 20 minutes, we're up 2-0, and
Vela in the 7th minute, Lee Win in the 20th minute. LAFC were up 2-0.
2-0. Flying. I don't really think Galaxy had many chances. I do remember I should have had an assist in like the 80th minute or something, dying minutes to Dio, and it hit the post. I cut it back, hit the post, ricochet back to him. He shot again, and it hit one of their defenders in the side of the head. He had no idea what was going on, and it goes out for corner. That would have made it 3-0. Icing on the cake, game over. But then, did we have some blunders? First goal, just a poor clearance. They get it top of the box, end up scoring. And then the second goal, I think everybody remembers the second goal, Horta's back pass.
Andre Horta back pass.
Yeah.
And I got to say, Andre Horta doing okay. He's playing in Greece with Olympiacos. He's 27 years of age. And there was so much pressure because this was a huge signing. And I remember John Thorrington saying, to get one of the top European prospects, which Andre Horta was, to come to LAFC was, unprecedented. They've kind of done it in more recent years with Bogusz and Tillman, but I don't think either one of those two were as hyped as Andre Horta, who I think is still valued at $6-7 million, even though his career has never met it. But I felt so. I mean, what was it like with those games? Because we knew the pressure had to be ramped up with him all the time. He has this moment, the back pass, Ole Kamara tucks it in, and the game ends up 2-2.
He was obviously a late signing that year, and we were already doing really well, but you felt that pressure. And as players, when you're doing well, you don't want to change anything. Like, hey, leave the guys that are in right now, whether it is Latif, Marc-Anthony Kaye, Benny Feilhaber, Lee Nguyen. Like, don't take those guys out to put in Horta. Nothing against Horta. He's a phenomenal player, so talented, but he's coming into a system where we've kind of gelled for, if you include preseason, 6, 7, 8 months. And I don't think he had started up until that point. So he comes in, if I'm not mistaken, and one of the first touches on the ball for him is a 40-yard backwards pass to Kamara, who's just, why is he there? That's my question. Stop cheating. Get your butt back on defense. And he says, thank you very much, goes in on a breakaway, dribbles by Tyler and scores. But what would have been sweet redemption for Horta, I remember he had a chance like 2 minutes later, top of the box, and just rifles it far post and hits the post.
That's
and I was
right.
just like,
how different could have been? He might still be here as a player.
He might still be here. Total redemption. We would have won 3-2. I don't think the fans would have quite turned on him. Poor guy. I felt bad for him. But I felt bad for him.
It just wasn't the right fit. And you mentioned Latif Blessing. I want to mention, if you haven't noticed, Latif Blessing has been tearing it up. He has like 3 goals in the last 5 games for the Houston Dynamo. So Latif's doing very well. Yeah. And first year, LAFC and the Galaxy, and I think LAFC feel like they've had the better. They've won the 2 big games, the 2 playoff games LAFC have won. But in year 2018, 4-3 game, the Galaxy won. And then that game was a 2-2 tie. And then the final game, which was a good result for LAFC, ended 1-1 back at Dignity Health Sports Park. So LAFC didn't win any of the 3 games in year 1.
No. And we let them have that, just so we can build up for the playoffs. So when we knock them out,
you did.
We were planning for the playoffs. We didn't care about the regular season because if my memory serves me correctly, we made the playoffs in 2018 and they didn't. So, and then the second year, we both made it and we knocked them out. So I think that's 2 for LAFC, 0 for Galaxy.
You guys are just fishing. You just had the bait on there and you're waiting for. There we got him.
Yeah.
Very well played. That's a Bob Bradley masterpiece right there.
It was.
Beta, great stuff, man. We'll look forward to. We'll be back and see how LAFC does with these home games. But all is well in the Black and Gold Kingdom. We'll talk soon, my friend. Enjoy all your golf.
Appreciate it. See you next time.
We'll be back here to talk with Junior Gonzalez, the head coach of LAFC2. That's next on Inside LAFC Podcast.
Inside LAFC Podcast is presented by Freeway Insurance. Driving savings.
We are back here on Inside LAFC Podcast, joined by LAFC2 head coach Junior Gonzalez, who, if you're listening to the pod, unfortunately, I got some bad news because Junior came dressed to impress, looking good, looking clean, got the beard all squared away.
Yeah, I didn't make sure I got get a nice trim before this meeting with you, Max. You're always setting the bar high.
Oh, you're too kind. It's not a meeting. This is a good chin wag, a nice chit chat between us two. We're talking about a great many things. We're certainly keeping an eye on LAFC2. I did want to mention, in case I forget later, 2 big games coming up for LAFC2 on the weekend. June 23rd, they'll take on Town FC, the Earthquakes LAFC2 team. The following Friday, June 28th, they'll take on Rapids, both at Titan Stadium. So get down, let's support the guys there, especially if you're in Orange County as an extension to the club here. And Junior, we've had a couple conversations this season on other content things that we have done. But just for the podcast, to introduce you a little bit and about your connection to the city, because you are an LA guy through and through.
Yeah. It's, I've been, my family was from Southgate area, Downey. We moved into Pomona, Montclair, and then ended up in Alta Loma, Rancho Cucamonga area. So I've been kind of, my playing career was all SoCal based. Once until I got into like the Olympic development program and youth national team setting where we started to go more into the different states. And then, I played at UCLA collegiately, started my collegiate coaching career in Riverside, so in the Empire, and then I was able to start my professional career coaching at Chivas USA. Since then, it's been a few different clubs that I've worked for and been able to travel with Seattle Sounders, Houston Dynamo, LA Galaxy, and also Chicago Fire. So it's been a good journey so far. I'm really excited that I'm back in our local market where I grew up playing and able to help the younger players here in LAFC and the local market improve their ability to make the first team. So it's been great. We missed the weather. Being in Chicago for 2.5 years was tough for us as a family. Moving from Huntington Beach to Naperville was a big transition. So we're back. We're glad to be back.
Naperville, that was Thorington's old stomping grounds when Chicago Fire were waiting for their new stadium to be built. I remember they had to do games there in the old high school stadium. It was a nice, for high school stadiums, it was pretty nice, but still, we've come a long way.
Yeah, for sure. But it was a good suburb for us to live in, good schools for the kids. So, but happy to be back in LA.
We like our weather, correct?
Yeah, no doubt.
Chicago's nice until January and February rolls around, and then you're like, what have I done?
No kidding.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about you in a bit, but you mentioned the player development, and I think it's important to look at LAFC2 and MLS NEXT Pro, what it's all about. And a big part of that, and we've spoken about this, is to shadow, I guess, is a good enough word for it, what LAFC is doing. So what the senior team is doing, LAFC2 is in lockstep with kind of to identify in that event that a player goes from the LAFC2 to LAFC. Why is that so important to have very similar playing styles, very similar systems for both teams?
Yeah, I believe even from the academy to the second team is important. It's just sticking to an identity and a philosophy and a DNA of a club and a vision of the club is extremely important, especially now when the game, we're getting more and more resources, more and more younger teams. I think in the academy, developing the individual and getting the technical and tactical understanding at a young age of what it's going to entail when they make the jump to the second team is important. And what's been nice about my transition here is that I've had really good communication with everyone in the club, especially Steve and the first team staff, of what our principles are, how do we teach the game, and how do we see the game in each phase of the field. And that's been really good because I've been able to sit down with Steve, with Mark, with Enrique, with Ante, and the different areas that they specialize in, and try to mimic that as much as possible within the profile of players that we have. There's always going to be some tweaks that you have to have because, obviously we don't have Bouanga on our team. We don't have a lot of the players, from the first team and those profiles, but there are versions of that within our environment that we're trying to develop in the same way so that when they get to the first team training environment, that they're not skipping a step. It's inevitably going to be faster. It's going to be quicker their speed of thought has to be at a faster rate than our training environment. But the concepts and principles is that the focus is that our players understand that when they make the jump, so that it shows that we're in line. And then from our style of play and how we're playing on the weekends, it should look like there's some same concepts being applied in every phase. And so, we start off really strong, and there was a lot of that you can see. But along the way, in the last 2 matches, we've taken some setbacks where we haven't been creating as many chances, and we've been giving up some goals. So I've been able to also watch the first team and how they're approaching their road games, maybe sitting a little bit deeper in a lower block and transitioning more. Those are things that I believe is the next progression of our team, is that we need to be able to sit deeper and maybe be a little bit more effective in the transitional moments from defense to attack. But overall, I'm really happy with the group. I believe in a second team environment, you have to suffer a little bit. The guys have to suffer, and we definitely suffered the last 2 matches with the results. But the hardest part about this environment with the second team is recognizing development when you're not getting the results. And
that's really interesting. And I wanted to follow up on one thing you said. You obviously have your own ideas on how a team is going to play, but you said that you'd sit there and watch how LAFC is adjusting with the way they're playing and incorporating that in what you do. I imagine it's to get results as best you can, but also to help those players if they do make that transition.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts from the second team. There's so many players going in and out of your environment on any given week, depending on the health of the first team players. Steve may ask for 4 or 5, sometimes even more players from our environment to jump up and to help them prepare. So that sometimes you're not working with the entire group until maybe the day before the match. So you're really developing the future of the second team as well, because you're getting a lot of the U17 players that had that excellent result yesterday, the 9-0 result in the playoffs. A lot of those guys were in our environment for quite a long time. So you have to just try to stay as consistent as possible in how you're teaching, and you end up having a bigger net of players that you affect. Some may not even play with you until the next season because they're younger and they're making the jump up into our environment because our starting guys are jumping to the first team environment. So with that said, you have to make sure that you're teaching in the same manner as the first team and believing in the same concepts and principles, or else it doesn't work. If you come into an environment like this and try to do your things your way and not the club way, it's a recipe for not a quality experience. So that's where we're at.
Well, and it's interesting. You're working out some new muscles along the way as a coach, which you put into the bank. I'm curious with those conversations. So Steve would say, we are putting our first team roster. We need so-and-so for this game. It may be different this week, but you have that conversation, and then you have to plan accordingly for your game.
Yeah, I'll do a week's periodization. I'll set up a plan of how we want to approach it. And then we figure out, usually could be, a lot of times Steve will give me an idea the week ahead of time so that we can kind of coordinate with the academy. Other times, what we also do is take a lot of local players that we have, tipsters from the local scouting network that are guys that we could possibly use or guys that we would possibly draft in the future. And since the college players are not in their spring season, they're off right now, we try to bring in a lot of local top talent to also kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They help us prepare, but we also get good insight on how they would fit into LAFC. And then they could be possibly guys that we could draft in the future or younger players that we can integrate into our academy. So like I said, our environment is, obviously we're in a competition and we want to make it as close to a first team setting by getting results and making the playoffs. But there's also a lot of kind of different avenues with scouting and seeing new talent that helps us keep our environment competitive. So, for instance, even today, we've had 9 trialists from the local market out because a lot of our younger guys are at the playoffs in Nashville and many of our guys are with the first team in Austin. So in order to keep a professional environment and competitive environment, you have to bring new blood constantly into our training environment, so that the guys that are signed on our team know that there's always other players that can come in and possibly fight for their spots, so that it keeps the competition high.
I think this is really eye-opening for a lot of folks because you get an idea of how many hats you have to wear. I think some people feel, I'm coming in, I'm coaching this team, but there's so much more to that. And I even just like, okay, I'm going to be short a couple players. I got to dip into the academy. So you have to have a real sense of these kids coming up and who is capable and ready to play for LAFC2, perhaps with a springboard one day to the senior team.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It's hard work. Yeah. Having a great staff and having a staff that are familiar with the players. Fabian Sandoval has been with the academy for many years and is my assistant coach. So I lean on him quite a bit. Talking to the, academy directors with Todd and Chris, the 17s coach. I mean, constant communication with them on the performances of the younger players. And just making sure that we're picking the right guys that need to be rewarded to come up and that they're doing their job professionally within their own environments to get rewarded to come into our environment. But yeah, this is my third or fourth go around in a second team environment with MLS clubs. So you learn from your experience what are the right ways to approach things. And it's only going to make me better as a better coach in the future. And if indeed I do jump up to a higher level, I'll have definitely a good understanding of what the second team coach is going through and integrate them in a right way, because that's also very important. I feel that my relationship with Steve, because he also has been in with the second team environment, with the Las Vegas Lights and my teams, we played against each other. He understands what I'm going through. And I believe that's why it's a smoother transition. At the end of the day, we're here to support the first team. It's not about our environment as much as it is, like when I watched the game against Orlando, I was ecstatic. And there's a lot of guys that we had starting with us that are now on the first team that are not playing as many games with us as of late, but I'm just excited to see them on the bench and in a position to possibly get on the field. So those are successes, just like making the playoffs or winning a championship in the second team.
You have to be pretty pumped with Nate. Nate comes in there, is involved in that last goal. Eric's getting in there. These are guys, and I see it, and it's got to be hard to be patient when you're these young players because you want that chance. You feel you've done the work, but there's always more work to be done, and some of them probably find it hard to stay on track. But then you have a guy, let's take Nate, for instance, who had a great shift, 15 minutes or so, and was able to make a big difference, and that's just a sign of the work. When sometimes you feel like I'm maybe further away from my goals, you still got to do it, and that's case in point because he was able to do it in the big spotlight there. Yeah,
it was exceptional action where he put his body on the line as well and was aggressive and was able to now create another opportunity, right, and get an assist per se with that action. I feel like the hardest part for those young players is when they do make the jump and do sign with the first team, is them understanding that when they're with the first team, that they need to increase their training level and even work extra hard to prove themselves to come on the field and make an impact. And as we've seen when Nate and even Duenas, right, has even a couple home games back, just watching him defend, I believe against New York, which was incredible to see how he played and started in that game. It was like the Red Bull, I believe, is a match. But I'm looking from the stands and I'm going, wow, this is incredible because they're approaching it the right way with the second team when they do come down, and they're extremely professional and they're putting in their shift there. And sometimes they don't see the fruits of that labor until they get the opportunity maybe 2 to 3 games later with the first team. So them being professional enough to understand that it's a process and that they're not quite yet maybe the starters with the first team, but when they do get sent down to play minutes with the second team, that they approach it in the same professional manner. And it's not easy for a young player to have to go and warm up for half the game, maybe the entire game on the sideline at the first team match in that environment, which we know is incredible. And then come to Cal State Fullerton where there's less fans. It's a Sunday, they're having to play a later game and actually ramp up again twice in one weekend to perform. And so those are the things that a lot of people from the outside don't know how difficult it is for those players that are coming down to play with the second team. And then you hope that they perform at a level where they're also inspiring the signed second team players, that they're showing that this is what it is to be a first team signed player coming down with the second team. So it's a unique environment in that respect.
I know my head because it's, kids who want to become these pro athletes, you see the work and just look at the example set by these kids. And you mentioned about rewarding, and it has to mean the world for you when one of the LAFC2 players sign a first team contract. You've had two. You've had Luis Mueller. You have had Tommy Musto. And just for clarity, during a season, the senior team can use a player from LAFC2. I think it's like two appearances, right?
4, I believe.
4 appearances. I'm sorry, I'm off. 4 appearances, and then after that, you have to sort of make a decision with them. And I don't see a lot of clubs have done that. LAFC has with those 2 players. So, what does it mean for you to see a guy who's put the work in and now has opened the eyes of the first team so much so that they're putting pen to paper?
Yeah, no, it's excellent. What it does is it improves our environment as well, because they're seeing our younger players are seeing that those opportunities are attainable. But what I said to both Luis and Tommy was, this is just the start. It's you're there, and you may be on the bench and you're at the matches, but there's so much more to be done to solidify your position, and don't get complacent or comfortable in that environment, because there's some really, really talented quality players on that first team. And if you're going to get an opportunity to win the confidence of the staff, it's going to be in the training environment. And it's going to be how hard you're working. Are you coming in early to get everything done? Are you showing your professionalism? And I just, for me, again, those players also have to come back down when they're not getting minutes with the first team. And they need to have that same hunger when they come with the second team. And I believe that's the biggest hurdle for those players that just get signed, is that they're so excited, and the excitement of being with the first team, that sometimes it's a learning curve for them to now get reintegrated with the second team. Because, to be honest, most of the minutes they're going to be getting are with us still. They're just now on, those guys that are coming down from that Saturday-Sunday transition. So I'm excited. I'm really happy for them. The more players that we can get from our environment. Obviously, this is also, Luis came this year, and which was great that we were able to sign him. I had been tracking him last year in the collegiate realm, and so that was great of the club to also believe in the same aspects, that he had a profile that would fit our team, and in such a short period of time earn a first team contract. It's very rare. And Tommy has been here. He was at the tail end of last year. So this is this is a product of Enrique's work as well. Enrique's work last year, although they didn't get the results per se from the standing standpoint, there was a ton of development during that time. So I came and just continued to develop the players that they had already started the process with. So it's a group effort when it comes to development. I can't take the credit. It's so many different pieces to the resources, the performance, the assistants, the weight coaches, the nutritionist, the mental coach. It's incredible what these players have at their disposal if they want to utilize them. And I'm just a small piece of that, but I do feel that our environment is improving, and we strive to improve it every day, and that the players are getting the instruction that are going to help them in that transition to the first team.
Fantastic. It's all there. And by the way, to a different degree, Luca Bombino getting to represent the U.S., that's a nice conversation I'm sure you're having as well, because that kind of all goes into what you're doing.
It's incredible. The more guys that we can get in that U.S. soccer national team environment representing our country, also being in a good position to get international games for their development, and hopefully Bombino's been quite a bit he's there in Austin now, right? So it's a testament to his development, his work, and what a great professional. I do foresee more players in the future from our group getting the opportunity with the first team, and that's just up to them, and they just got to continue working, and at the end of the day, it's the first team staff and obviously the front office to decide when the right time is for those young players.
And you got the Open Cup. We saw a few guys at least make the bench there, but that opportunity will be coming up in July as well in the quarterfinals, because you have Abraham Romero. I mean, the list of guys: Tommy Angel, who's on the bench. Abraham, who's the backup goalkeeper. Eddie Segura started with LAFC2, and we've seen him making the breakthrough. And we mentioned Nate and Eric as well. It's a nice group. It's a nice backbone of the team right there, Junior.
Yeah, it is. It is. You know, I mean, there are some times when I'm looking at the opponent's team sheet that I wish I had those guys back. But I know that they belong in the first team environment, and that it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for our younger players to fill those spots now in this summer, to continue the success of the team, which is our job, to give them the confidence and develop them to compete at that level.
Well, we got a great one here at LAFC2 and Junior Gonzalez. And you mentioned Enrique Duran, who was the LAFC2 coach. Now he's part of the staff. And you guys, as you said, the goal is to be a senior team coach. And this is a pathway. And when you do that, Junior, you'll know how it all works, and you'll have to kind of give the guidance to the second team coach. So it's all going into the system. But man, you're doing a great job. We look forward to the goals you want to reach with LAFC2 this season. We know that season's going to come through. You're in a nice position. I know you didn't have a couple good results, but you're certainly in a position to get to those goals still.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Max. It's always a pleasure getting some time with you, and appreciate the time.
My pleasure, certainly, Junior. Junior Gonzalez, head coach of LAFC2. Get out there. You have two great opportunities coming up the next couple weeks. On the 23rd against Town FC, the 28th against Rapids 2 down at Titan Stadium in Fullerton. That's all the time we have for Inside LAFC podcast. As always, great to have you along board. We always try and do the best show possible with some great guests, and we'll do it again next week. We'll see you then.